Giron brings the smiles back to the French as he gets their first stage win of the Tour. While Chris Boardman, his mind on the world title in August, is tired and he wants out. But last night his manager persuaded him to go on, at least for one more day. The Tour gets no easier though, and today the riders pierce the Pyrenees with a mountain at the end which no one knows and the riders openly fear. Could the climb wipe the smile off Miguel Indurain, who leads Rominger and Bortolami overall, while Boardman and Yates retain their high positions? Hello again and welcome to Chaors, and what a tremendous day in prospect now as we head off into the mountains. We've had 11 days of flat road racing, and of the 189 riders who set out from Lille, 175 still survive. Well, today on the start line, one or two of them, I'm sure, are feeling very nervous indeed. Until now, we've talked about names like Johan Museo, Abdou Japarov and Jackie Giron. Now we should bring you names of climbers, men like Echevet, Cubino and Rincon. As they roll away to a tremendous applause this morning, many of them must be wondering what the day holds for them. And as they roll clear of Cahors in nice sunny conditions, rivals they most certainly are. But that doesn't mean Indurain and Rominger can't pass the time of day together before the big climb will once again put them at odds.
Well, despite a sunny and warm start, it's going to be chilly later on, with mist probably at altitude. The temperature expected to plunge today to the low 20 degrees Celsius, and there's not going to be any wind at all.
And on the first climb, such as it was, on the Côte de Saint-Clair, Peter de Klerk had time to look back at second-place finisher Emmanuel Magnan. And then, just 11 kilometres later, it happened, rather suddenly. Chris Boardman swung around in the road in the streets of Florence at the feeding station and headed for his car with no regrets. His Tour de France was over, at least for a year.
Yeah, it's a difficult bit. It's always the most difficult bit. It's a bit weird, actually, that you spend 3 weeks totally getting your head kicked in, and when it's time to stop, it's really difficult. But it was an agreement we made. I'm starting to get tired. Now it's time to start concentrating on the World Championship. Thanks for all the support I've had. It's been absolutely fantastic. And next year, I want to be back here looking to try and do something in the overall.
Great, thanks. Well done.
Well, Chris has given us immense pleasure in this race, and we all wish him good luck in the world titles next month. And the race goes on. We've moved a further 30 kilometres down the road now, and Mountains leader Peter de Klerk winning again on another small climb, and once more finishing in front of Emmanuel Magnan. And so, on the descent of that second climb, this breakaway formed of some 5 riders, and they've been away now for just over 100 kilometres with a maximum lead of 6.5 minutes, and we're on the outskirts of Lourdes. In the breakaway, Stephen Schwartz sitting at the back here, Massimo Girotto setting the pace. The other riders are Ralph Yerman, Emmanuel Magnan and Eric Decker. And they're coming up to the last sprint of the day at 237 kilometres covered, and then they'll leave Lourdes and head briefly down the valley before they'll turn left and start the climb up to the finishing line, which is about 20 kilometres away from the town.
Well, as they come into Lourdes here for that sprint, it really has been a hard day for these riders, and it doesn't look to me now as if one of the 5 men here will be going for the victory today, because the peloton is going so quickly at the moment. I'm quite sure that on the first few kilometres of that climb, it's all going to come back together, and we're going to have a royal battle amongst the climbers.
Well, it has been a tremendous chase. At one time, they were 6 minutes 32 seconds up. The majority of the chasing has not been done by Indurain, but by the Once team, so it indicates to us that maybe they're trying to get Alex Zula a good springboard into the hill coming up in what will be a few moments' time now for these riders as they go under the sprint banner here. And I don't think they'll contest the sprint. There are no longer any time bonuses today, or any more, indeed, in this year's Tour de France. They're all finished with now, and none of these riders either are featuring in the daily points classification, so there's no real interest to sprint, except, of course, for the first prize on the line, which is a few pounds. Magnan at the back survived a very awkward puncture in the front wheel halfway through the break to try, which he got back into the group quite quickly.
It actually looks here as if Emmanuel Magnan might just be teeing himself up to go for the sprint here. He's looking at the other riders, and there I was just waiting for him to make the move, and he's gone down the outside.
Well, the glory for France. Takes a look over his shoulder, but he may have gone a bit early. Stephen Schwartz warming up now behind the balding Girotto, himself previously a stage winner in the Tour de France. But I think Emmanuel is going to take the victory, and he does quite clearly from Girotto and from Swart, Decker, and at the back, Yerman.
Well, I tell you, it really is closing down very quickly, because I think that was the 1 kilometre sign for the next sprint there, and the Once team doing a great job at the front trying to bring this all back together. The peloton over the last few kilometres really have been flying along, and you see now that the impetus again once more has gone out of the breakaway. They've realised that just around the corner is the big climb, and they're just going to try and recuperate a little bit before they hit that climb.
And the leaders are looking a little bit ragged now as we race along the flatlands of the Route Nationale 21. And very shortly, you can see the hills now on the left. The Pyrenees are with us, and the riders will be swinging left and starting the climb not very far off now. It's about 13 kilometres of climbing to come, and in those 13 kilometres, the riders climb an elevation of 1,000 metres. That really is a steep ascent. The fight is on, and indeed, Ernesto have got their men to the front. So too, the Once boys keeping Breukink and Zuller in the thick of the action, giving them the best possible send-off as they start the first big climb of this year's Tour de France. The tall man here is Alberto Leonis Berrutia, and Breukink's behind him.
He's come up very early on. In fact, I'm not so sure that Breukink is really thinking about himself at the moment. I think maybe the whole team have dedicated this stage to Oliviero Rancon, who's been very quiet in the Tour de France so far, and it may well be that that's what they're betting on.
And there's the time check which we've just heard of 1 minute 40 seconds being shown now to the breakaway and also to the following vehicles. And because of the narrowness of the roads, I think they will take those cars out a lot earlier than normal, because they won't be able to get out of the way of the field if they get trapped in there as the riders start the climb. Long way back to the last man in that big peloton now. 2 riders missing. Chris Boardman has retired, and so too has Roberto Petito from the Mercatoni Uno team. So 2 riders that we know of out today, bringing the field down to 173. Because the hill is at the end, Paul, there should not be riders eliminated on this stage.
Well, no, I just had a quick look and a quick calculation of the elimination times. The whole field is together here at the moment, and the fact that it's been such a long stage, the elimination time will be quite long today, around about 35 minutes, so these riders don't have a great deal to worry about. It's on the longer stages with 4 or 5 cols, that's when we'll start to see riders being eliminated. But you see now how the road has started to narrow out. It's okay for these riders, just 5 of them at the front, but back in the main field, people will be fighting for position. They'll want to stay in the front 15 or 20 places because they know how important it is to start a climb near the front, because if you're at the back of the main pack on a narrow road like this, you could be something like 1 minute behind the leaders.
Well, we are now on the lower slopes of the climb, and the 5 leaders are being brought back very steadily by that chasing group, but there's still plenty of action to come. So we'll take a break.
Welcome back. Well, today the Tour enters its decisive phase, because it's in the mountain stages that Tony Rominger really has to attack Miguel Indurain if he's going to stop the Spaniard taking his 4th successive Tour. And Rominger has been training specifically for this Tour at altitude, not in the Alps as you might expect from a Swiss rider, but in America. After his 2nd straight victory in the Spanish Tour, the Vuelta in May, Rominger headed straight for the rarefied air of the Rockies. He was thinking, though, of France.
It's only for the Tour de France I am here. This month we are working here, it was only for the Tour de France. We'll see what happens, huh?
What's supposed to happen is that once the body adapts to the thin air at altitude, its power output when it switches back to an oxygen-rich atmosphere is greatly enhanced. Last year it seemed to work. Rominger not only outperformed Indurain in the mountains, he inflicted the Spaniard's first time trial defeat in 3 tours.
57 minutes and 2 seconds for Tony Rominger, an absolutely superb time, and Miguel Indurain won't know it yet, but he's going to have to pull out something rather special now.
I think he is right now the strongest rider in the hills, and the only one of the only one, as we saw in the Giro, who will be able to beat Indurain in the time trial.
Tony's trip was a family affair too, allowing him to relax away from the constant scrutiny he's under in Europe. But by and large it was business. Some riders use the less important races to get into shape. Rominger, though, isn't one of them.
I'm sure I train better myself than in the races, because I don't know, I don't like to go for a race only for training. When I go for a race, I will win it, and that's it.
Rominger won a lot of fans with his fighting style in the mountains in last year's Tour, and many in cycling see him as the only alternative to the continued reign of the brilliant but unexciting Indurain.
People don't want to see Indurain kind of winning time trials and hanging on the mountains. There's no fun in it anymore. We've seen it and read it all. So for me personally, knowing Rominger very well also, I feel he deserves to win a Tour de France. And I think if this year he could win the Tour de France, it'll make the Tour de France a much better event.
Rominger's grateful for the support of men like Roach, but anxious not to be seen as anti-Indurain himself.
It's not like that it seems. I don't hate him. It's a great rider, and he's better than me. I'm the first who will congratulate him for the victory. For me, it's important that it's a great show, good sport, and that the best will win. When you win the Tour de France, you can say you're the best rider of the world.
Well, by his own standards, Tony Rominger is currently 2 minutes 28 away from being the best in the world. But if ever there was a race designed to give him a chance of beating Miguel Indurain, then this is it. The mountain section is the most severe in recent history, and it culminates on stage 19 with an alpine time trial finishing in Avoriaz. That could be decisive. So this tour is far from being over yet, and we're not saying that just to keep you watching. All right, back to the race on the road now with Phil and Paul.
Well, Gary, back here with the action. There have been changes. The 5 riders have been caught at the start of the climb, and the Italian Marco Pantani has gone ahead alone. Now, we noted he changed the bike down in Lourdes, and we think to a lighter one, so clearly the attack was part of his plan today. We're about halfway up the climb now. Rominger is in this group, but this group has thinned out somewhat, and Miguel Indurain being left to do all of the work at the front. And amongst the team leaders, we've got Bjorn Ries up here, who leads the Gaviz team. We've got Cubinho, who leads the Kelmer team. Pavel Tonkov, who leads the Lampre team. Alex Zula, the Once team. Indurain, of course, and team leader of Mapai Rominger.
And what is interesting, actually, to note is there are 3 members of the Festina squad in this breakaway as well. I saw Pascal Lino, the former yellow jersey holder, also Richard Biron. Attack here by Lordolino Cubino, 171, the Kelme rider. He's been the Spanish champion, he's been a stage winner in the Tour de France before, and he's decided now's the time to try and get across to Pantani. He realizes that there is no main chase in the group behind, so he's going to take his chance and try and get across, and he's got the gap straight away.
Well, there's a little way to go before he hits the cooler mist. It comes a couple of kilometres from the top, where the roads are dry again. They've been through one rain shower on the outskirts of Lourdes, but that's passed by.
And Cubino couldn't get the gap, and it's Indurain himself who is just setting the tempo at the front. He's not worried about Pantani, but just making the pace too difficult for anybody else, but he has to assume all the control now, because I think Jean-Francois Bernard has also disappeared from this group, so Indurain now is totally isolated. But it looks to me as if Rominger is sitting back a little bit, and maybe the fact that this is the first mountain of the Tour de France, he hasn't quite got his mountain legs, as they say in cycling jargon, yet.
He could also be waiting for maybe the last kilometre, just to psychologically sprint away and get 30 seconds perhaps back of lost time on Indurain. Now that Indurain's alone and setting all the tempo himself, you could never tell with Tony Rominger. He did hurt Indurain last year in the mountain. He did win 2 stages in the Alps, and the Alps this year are particularly hard. But right now, Indurain is looking immensely strong. Takes a little look over his shoulder there to see if the boys are enjoying themselves on his wheel.
In fact, 1 or 2 riders starting to disappear from this group. There, number 71 is Pavel Tonkov, a man who was the best young rider in the Tour of Italy a couple of years ago, and we get a chance to look a little bit further down here. I think this is Pascal Lino, who was in that group just a little bit before, and there is Jean-Francois Bernard. He's a spent force today, but it looks to me as if this is Tony Rominger.
And on the left of the road there, the cameras come back because Rominger has been dropped. Tony Rominger has been dropped from that lead group in this small group that's come back. And that is something of a surprise, to say the least. He's with riders who are not regarded as big climbers. Udo Bolt is just behind him. Jean-Francois Bernard is just in front of him, and there is Bernard there. And the other rider climbing away there is Abraham Olano of Spain. And this is a big surprise. The champion of Spain has been dropped. Well, that's not such a surprise, but Tony Rominger has been dropped and rides behind Pascal Lino.
Well, this is what can happen when you go up the first mountain of the Tour de France. It's been a very tough tour so far, and a lot of riders put a lot of energy into these first few stages, and to see Tony Rominger get blown away like that, I'm very surprised. That's probably why Miguel Indurain now keeps looking over his shoulder just to make a count of who is in the group with him.
Well, there he is, Miguel Indurain. Actually looks as though he's trying now for a change at least, as he grimaces a little bit. But my goodness me, he should do. He's torn this race apart, and still trying to hang on to his back wheel is the Frenchman Luc Leblanc, who tried so hard to snatch the race lead when we came through his home area of Limoges. There is Leblanc, and there is Veronk, and two French riders now keeping the name of France high on the honours list here, because that's all that's left. And now it's De Las Cuevas, and I think this is a remarkable performance by De Las Cuevas. He's not a great climber anyway, but he's determined to get a good result out of this year's Tour de France, and he's gritting his teeth, and he's hanging on. Just a very good performance, and an ever-increasing piece of class here, De Las Cuevas. He has all the ability in the time trial, and now he may well survive to get a high finish in this year's Tour de France. But it looks as though Veronk has cracked as well now. Richard Veronk has gone. That leaves only one on the wheel of Indurain, and that will be Luc Leblanc. Then there were two. It is absolutely amazing. This man has just sat there. He hasn't altered his pace. He's just watched everybody scrabble for his wheel and lose it. Well, we're now into the mist at 4 kilometres to go. It gets a little bit worse than this, in fact. And Pantani is the rider through in the lead. We've got a watch running on him on that banner, and I think the gap is coming down. It was just over 20 seconds at 5 kilometres. But he better watch out, because he could be on the slow track, because on the express line is this man in yellow, Miguel Indurain.
You know, he's really going for it, because now he's getting out of the saddle. He's fighting with his bicycle to get that gear going round, and the red car in front is the car that is behind Marco Pantani, so it won't be very long, I don't think, before Miguel Indurain actually gets up there and gets into contact with him. And what a fight that will be. It'll be interesting to see if Pantani has got anything left to go again, because it does get a little bit steeper in the last few kilometres before it levels out nearer the summit. Look at the face on that man. It's very rare that you see him try this hard.
Absolutely. You can see the sweat running down his cheeks there, and he doesn't always put this sort of heart into it, because there's still a long way to go in this year's Tour de France, and mountains much worse than this still to come. Well, Pantani's looked over his shoulder, and he will have felt that as he shook his head. He can't believe it. He's seen the yellow jersey. He's chasing him. Now he's going to have to try and sprint again. Look at the relentless pursuit behind, as Pantani is being closed in on by Indurain. And you know, Paul, I think Leblanc may now be in trouble after making that turn at the front.
He may well be, but this is what Marco Pantani is finding out today, that the Tour of Italy is not the Tour de France. You can ride away from the main field in the Tour of Italy, but there's much more at stake when you come to the Tour de France, and Indurain really fighting here. It's very rare that you see himself put himself through something like this for a stage victory, but he really wants to get back there, but he can't quite get the last 20 metres, but there it is. It looks now as if the junction is about to be made, and it may well be that Luc Leblanc has enough left to surprise Indurain at the top. But I tell you what, I think this man would definitely like to get the stage victory, because he didn't win a big mountain stage last year. They were both taken off him by Tony Rominger, and he just goes straight by.
He's gone straight by. There are no superlatives left to describe Indurain, but Luc Leblanc has gone. He's gone at the minute Indurain came up, and that will upset Indurain, because he was wanting this stage, and he's made that clearly obvious. And now Luc Leblanc has attacked at the very moment Indurain called Pantani. A good tactic.
Well, you know, it's quite easy for a climber to get the gap on somebody like Miguel Indurain, but it isn't easy to keep the gap. And it looks to me as if Leblanc had the explosion to get clear, but he doesn't have the power to stay clear of Miguel Indurain, because Indurain is still eating his way back into the lead that Luc Leblanc has got there. You see, he's just cruising along, going to get him back, and if he can peg him back, I don't know that Leblanc has got much left to take it.
Well, the spectator there was giving him all of the encouragement to keep going. This certainly is the big effort now coming from Leblanc. And it's an even bigger one from Indurain, who is determined to grab that wheel before it goes into the mist. And he's coming at him like a cannonball. And once he gets on, he's going to sit in that slipstream and say, don't try that one again.
And now Marco Pantani, he tried, and I thought he had a chance of getting that victory there, but he's got blown away as well. But I've rarely seen Miguel Indurain ride like this. The face that he's got at the moment is the mask that I've seen very rarely on a man like this. He really, look at him. I feel it's incredible to see how hard he's trying.
Well, it's absolutely wonderful too to see such a great athlete at the height of his career do what he's done today. He just kept a tempo that destroyed that break one by one, and only Leblanc has gritted his teeth and hung on, had the cheek to attack him. Indurain came back and answered that, and Leblanc is going again. Now can the big Miguel Indurain grit his teeth one more time and take the wheel of Leblanc? A good acceleration by Leblanc, but they hasn't got the force there now. Indurain is straight in.
Well, I don't think either of them have got the force to go, but Leblanc taking the initiative of going to the front. It's not very far to go now. It's 400 metres maybe around this corner, and Indurain is going to wait, and it's going to be very close, and he's going to be a very angry man if he doesn't win this stage.
Well, this has been a marvellous climb, the first big climb in the Tour de France, a chance to watch a magnificent man at work, and Miguel Indurain is now launching himself towards the line. They can't really pin down where the line is in the fog up here on the top, but Indurain has made such a wonderful job of this climb. He's destroyed the hearts of all of the riders in the Tour de France. And Luc Leblanc is trying to carry the colours of France. He'll be going to 250 metres to go now. Leblanc is going to go, and I think he'll go at around 150. But Indurain is the only thing he hasn't got is a fast acceleration, so he's starting to wind it up now at 200. Leblanc goes by him. As we peer down into the mist from our fixed cameras, we'll see the Frenchman now, Luc Leblanc, sprint clear for a memorable victory here. He's the only man in the Tour de France who could take on Miguel Indurain and beat him to the line. But today, Indurain has increased his overall lead over all of his principal rivals in the Tour de France. Up to the line now comes the rider who started the attack at the bottom, Marco Pantani, who finished second overall in the Tour of Italy. And now the little shadow on the left who crosses the line. 2 minutes 21 seconds down is Tony Rominger. Well, he's lost almost the same gap. He was behind Indurain overnight. He was down 2:28, and in just one climb he's lost 2 minutes 21 seconds today, and certainly all hope of winning this year's Tour de France. A great show of defiance today by Luc Leblanc. He gets the stage win by 2 seconds ahead of Miguel Indurain, Marco Pantani third, Richard Viron fourth, and Armand de las Cuevas fifth. 3 French riders there in the top 5. In 16th place, Tony Rominger. He finishes 2 minutes and 21 seconds back. But on the podium, Luc Leblanc, giving France their second stage win in as many days. Overall, though, Miguel Indurain now leads this tour by 4 minutes and 47 seconds ahead of Rominger. De las Cuevas is third. Peter Ugumov comes into fourth. And after that great ride, Luc Leblanc is now fifth. But the man in yellow salutes the public again tonight, and I'm not surprised he looks happy, and they appreciate that. Is there no limit to the abilities of Miguel Indurain? Today he gave us a demonstration of pure class on the first big mountain of this year's Tour de France. In fact, he finished over 15 minutes ahead of Sean Yates, and the last riders across the line just ahead of the broom wagon, Claudio Chiappucci, 24 minutes behind. The riders now take a well-earned rest tomorrow, but we'll have a programme as usual coming to you at 8 o'clock. We'll be talking to Chris Boardman, who made the first half of this year's Tour de France a memorable one for British viewers. The mist is now swirling in here. We'll be back tomorrow. Until then, goodbye.